started. My name is Aiten Salahi, and I want to welcome every single one of you for joining us tonight for an hour called Planetary Health on the Menu, where we discuss how you can incorporate sustainability into a career in food and nutrition. We are the Planetary Health Collective, and we have been putting on this event for the last 3 months. So this is our 4th, and we'll be continuing to do so for the next couple of months. So if you love this event and you want to continue expanding your horizons and seeing different ways that thought leaders in the field are beginning to intersect sustainability with health and nutrition, please continue to join us. So we're going to go over today's agenda very briefly. My name is Aiten, again, founder of the Planetary Health Collective, one of the founders, and I'm joined tonight by Mary Purdy, who is our Director of Education, and Bretta Alstrom, who is our Director of Operations, who are going to be helping to moderate our discussion and our panel questions tonight. So we will start by establishing norms and etiquette for the call, nothing that you guys haven't heard already with all of our practice on Zoom. I'll introduce you to the Planetary Health Collective, and then we're going to turn it right over to Mary, who is going to introduce our panelists, hand over the mic to them so they can share a little bit more about their stories, their passions, how they learned how to integrate sustainability into their careers and what they're doing now. And then we're going to start with some panel questions that we have prepared for our esteemed panelists tonight. And if you have any questions that you came prepared with tonight for our speakers, or if anything comes to mind for you to ask them throughout the course of tonight's call, please feel free to send those directly into the chat, because we will be screening those and we'll be pulling from them to ask to the panelists at the very end of the call. And Bretta will be moderating that part of the discussion. So then at the very end, if all of this resonated with you and you're looking for more ways to get involved with the Planetary Health Collective, we'll give you a couple options there. Norms and etiquette, go ahead and mute your line if you have not done so already. Please also add your pronouns by clicking on the participants list at the very top of the screen, clicking on your name and hitting rename. Just go ahead and add your pronouns that way. If you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, we want to get to know you. So let us know your name, where you're from, and what it is about the event that you're most excited tonight. As always, in any space, practice respect. This is a safe, diverse, and identity-affirming space, so hate speech or bullying of any kind will result in immediate removal from the call, which I know is not going to be a problem, but we got to say it anyways. And please feel free to participate. Please use the chat feature. We will be moderating the chat, so if you want to ask us a question or if you have some feedback for us, please use that feature. We love it, and we love pulling questions from there as well for the panel Q&A at the very end. And if you really love this event tonight, we are accepting donations directly through Eventbrite, and you can submit a donation by purchasing a donation-based ticket, either for this event or for following events. So we are the Planetary Health Collective. We are hosting this panel series, and we are a movement to mitigate climate change and nourish human health by identifying that we in the food and nutrition field have such tight proximity to various levers that we can pull to improve both human health and environmental sustainability for the betterment of both. Our mission at the Planetary Health Collective is to create a space that's been largely virtual, thanks COVID, to activate, incubate, and elevate leadership potential for food and nutrition professionals who are passionate about finding a way to integrate sustainability into the work that they do in food and nutrition. Our vision is to provide an unparalleled opportunity for food and nutrition professionals of all kinds to channel their unique passions and skills to counter the climate crisis with intersectionality, urgency, and persistence. So we educate, incubate, and activate. We learn how to teach, or we learn and teach how to connect the dots between food, climate, labor, racial, and health justice. And we provide educational opportunities for members in our community to learn and teach about those topics as well. We also incubate. So we take individuals of all experience levels, welcome everybody into our space, and we foster their unique skills and passions in this fight and in this endeavor, and work together to think creatively about how each and every one of us can contribute something to this work meaningfully. And we also activate. We take action alongside our allies to forge a path forward for systemic change in food and climate at local, state, and federal levels. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's event. I'm going to pass over the mic to Mary Purdy, and she'll be briefly introducing our panelists, and we'll hand it over to them so they can tell us a little bit more about their journey. So please think of some questions, tune in, send your question into the Q&A as we go. And Mary, you're up.
Thank you so much, I-10. It's wonderful to be here. Again, my name is Mary Purdy. I am actually spending time right now in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts, which is the traditional land of the Pocumtuck, the Wabanaki, and the Nipmuc. We definitely recommend that you, if you have an opportunity to see whose land you are on, it's always helpful to find out and connect to the indigenous communities whose land you are occupying currently. I put a little link in the chat so you can actually take a look to see where you are spending your time and days these days. We respect that connection that indigenous people have to our various regions. We recognize the complex history of our settler colonialism, our participation in that process, as well as our commitment to honoring those who have stewarded the land for many generations. So thank you so much for all being here tonight. As you know, our food and agricultural system is a bit of a mess, and it is not sustainable, it is not equitable, it is not just, and that is why we see dietitians and nutrition professionals as being perfectly leveraged to participate in creating a better food system for all. So many of us don't get that kind of training in our school programs about that connection between nutrition and the environment and health and climate change. And so our belief is that dietitians and nutrition and food professionals can play a really significant and influential role in this conversation, and that a career in sustainability is absolutely possible. So tonight we are able to bring you three fantastic speakers. I'm so excited to introduce these folks who have made sustainability part of what they do in their professional lives. So I want to kick it off with our first speaker, whose name is Nadia Jones, and then she will give a 5 to 7 minute presentation. And then I'll introduce our next speaker, Sara Reinhart, who will also give a 5 to 7 minute presentation. And lastly, Marie Spiker will give a 5-minute presentation. Then I'll ask some questions of these panelists, and then you all will have an opportunity to ask your own questions of these amazing brains and people in the profession right now. So Nadia, if you would share your screen, I will introduce you. So Nadia is a New York City-based clinical dietitian within the New York Presbyterian Hospital System, and is the founder of Brooklyn Nutrition Practice, a culture-focused nutrition counseling platform. She also serves as the co-chair of the Hunger and Environmental Nutrition Special Interest Group, also known as HENSIG, for the Greater New York Dietetic Association, where she helps promote food security and community and environmental health while utilizing sustainable agricultural practices. Nadia, I will let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Mary, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So like Mary said, my name is Nadia Jones. I'm a New York City-based registered dietitian, and like most dietitians, I wear many, many hats. As you can see, I work as an in-clinic, inpatient, registered dietitian, but I also own a online nutrition practice. I teach urban gardening classes, develop recipes, and I'm also involved in quite a few communities that are focused on promoting social justice, gardening, and eco-friendly agricultural practice. So as you can imagine, my days can be very loaded. But when you're really passionate about something, you really do find the time. And my passion, one of my passions is promoting community and environmental health. And I do that through many ways and very easy ways. I think that's my main lesson that I really want to get across today, is that there are so many innovative ways that you can do this, and it can be very easy. So I grew up in Guyana, South America, in a farming island, and so I've always been involved in growing my own food, having a vegetable garden. And so when I moved to the United States, I really wanted to continue that and, continue with playing in the dirt and sourcing my own food. I joined my community garden, and through that, I was able to promote small space gardening through social media, Instagram, Facebook, just every day posting stories, posting lives of ways that how easy it is to grow your own food, but also in very, very small spaces, and also talk about eco-friendly ways that we can handle things like pest control, weed control, and then starting that conversation of where our food is coming from and the environmental impact, and also promoting regarding to table cooking, because what are you going to do with all of these vegetables? So with that, I had a lot of fun. I really started a little mini movement. I had people from Dubai, from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from all over the world reaching out and showing me their progress, and how they've been growing, asking questions, trying out recipes, trying to be more plant forward and more involved in sourcing their own food. When the pandemic happened, I lost access to my garden, and so I brought my entire vegetable garden into my really tiny Brooklyn apartment, growing out, growing in my bedroom windowsill, because that's where it was south facing, and so it was like the best place to get the best yield. And if you look at those photos, I was able to get, grow tomatoes, collard greens, carrots, full salad bowls. I grew peppers. I grew just really got really creative and continued to promote this idea that you can grow your own food in whatever space that you're in, and then starting the mornings harvesting those vegetables and cooking them and showing how easy it is and how delicious you can make plants and vegetables, because we know that there's also a barrier with trying out new things and eating more vegetables because it's not always palatable. With that, from that, I was able to collaborate with a lot of organizations through Instagram Lives, through classroom visits, and teaching small space garden. And I was able to have my passion and my hobby become a side gig that continues to grow today. Since then, I've been able to teach gardening classes with several elementary schools, more Instagram Lives, collaborating with universities and various dietetic academy organizations, showing again how easy it is to grow your own food, continuing that conversation about eco-friendly nutrition and agricultural practices, trying to become more plant forward as well, while also growing my career. I've recently started integrating seed to table cooking classes within these webinars as well. From working with clients in my private practice, I've identified that one of the greatest barriers to eating more vegetables is simply not knowing how to cook them, and so showing audiences, showing clients how to make plan for dishes that are very simple to make, affordable, and most importantly, delicious, has been really a great way to engage and retain more people in the climate change movement, and that's also, again, continuing to add more layers to my growing career in sustainable nutrition. That's it. That's, again, like I said, my main message is that if you're interested in starting a career in any passion at all, you don't have to start big. You can start in many different innovative ways and just plant a seed and really see where it takes you. Keep watering that passion and give it some sunshine. If you have any questions, would like to stay in touch, here's my contact information. Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I love that. If you have a passion, just keep watering it. Great advice. And it's so wonderful to see you take some of these concepts and put them into your practice, into your teaching, into your interactions with your patients on a regular basis. Those seed to table classes and just growing vegetables in your Brooklyn apartment is truly inspiring. So as a New Yorker myself, I know that ain't an easy thing. So thank you for bringing that and shining some light on that, literally and figuratively. Okay, let's move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Sara Reinhart. She is a senior analyst for food systems and health in the Food and Environmental Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists. In her role there, she applies nutrition science and public health research methods to develop positions in support of a more healthful, sustainable, and equitable food system. And Sara, if you would put your slides up, great. And if you didn't get a chance to read an amazing article that I have to highlight that Sara wrote that just came out this week called Sustainable Nutrition Science Could Help Solve Climate and Health Crises. Why isn't the federal government spending more of it? I now introduce you to Sara. Take it over.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate it. And so cool to hear about what Nadia is doing and really fun to be able to see what folks are doing in the chat. So I'm just really happy to be here. So my name is Sara. I am a senior analyst of food systems and health at the Union of Concerned Scientists in Washington, D.C. I've been there about 5 years now. And for those who might not be familiar with the Union of Concerned Scientists, we are a national nonprofit that engages in research and policy on a lot of different issues related to the environment and to health. So, we don't just do work on food. There are other programs that do work on, sustainable energy sources, transportation, and also the role of democracy and democratic decision making. So a lot of interesting things going on, but I myself work in our food and agriculture program. And just to give a little bit of background about, what does it mean to work at a policy shop? What does it mean to do research that serves policy advocacy? So kind of the general way that works is, you've got your main policies, and typically we work on federal policy. So that's national policy, right? US policy. And so that can look like, the Farm Bill. That's a big one. And for those who aren't familiar with the Farm Bill, that is just an enormous piece of legislation that includes just about everything from, what kind of subsidies agricultural crops receive. So corn, soy, wheat, you might be thinking correctly. And it determines, what kind of support farmers get for practicing conservation programs. The lion's share of the budget in the Farm Bill actually goes to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which used to be called food stamps. And so folks are often surprised that there is so much nutrition policy within the Farm Bill. So, that's one really huge vehicle that, that we're working on often, and that'll be coming up again in 2023. Another vehicle for policy that I'll talk about here in a second is the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So, that's a kind of a policy document, a science-based policy document that gets updated every 5 years by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, and a committee of experts. And, I'm sure in this virtual space, we're all pretty familiar with what the dietary guidelines do for our profession, right? They provide evidence-based guidance for all kinds of things. And there's a special role to play there for sustainability that I'll get to in a second. And then another large vehicle for policy is child nutrition programs. So that's things like healthy school lunches, school breakfasts, after school programs, things like that. So these are some of the major nutrition, policy vehicles I work in, but sustainability is certainly sort of the lens through which I view my work, right? It's about a sustainable, equitable, and healthy food system. And so, in a lot of these policies, they weren't necessarily oriented around, all three of those concepts. And so it's a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes to be the person, coming in the room saying, yes, let's promote healthy meals for kids. Let's get more funding for that. And also, is there a way that we can leverage this funding, to support local farmers, to support farmers of color, to support farmers who are practicing good agricultural practices that, help conserve natural resources. So it's an interesting lens to bring to this world, where there are a lot of folks kind of in the traditional nutrition track, who are really, passionate and wonderful at what they do. And, sometimes it just takes a little bit of conversation and collaboration and relationship building to be able to find, the way to say, hey, have you ever thought about maybe we should incorporate this into our policy platform? And maybe there are ways to think about, concepts that are sort of at the periphery of nutrition for a lot of folks in this space. So I'll share just a few examples of some of the work I've done in the last 3 years or so. And I'm happy to kind of answer more questions about these later. So one of the things I did, I mentioned that the dietary guidelines, have sort of a unique relationship to sustainability. And folks may already know that in 2015, which was not the most recent update, but the one prior, sustainability was a concept that was sort of, it was really making its way into the lexicon of dietary guidance. And the committee of experts that was charged with developing these guidelines was asked to, consider sustainability and make some recommendations about, what would that look like for people. The end of a long story is that got pretty politically charged. You can imagine, even knowing just a base amount about what sustainability means for our food consumption, it typically means fewer animal products. And so, political interests do what they do. And, industries who stood to lose from that recommendation or from those guidance, or from the updated guidance, spoke out and pushed back. And so in 2020, this last cycle, we were really heavily engaged, and, and our organization said, well, if sustainability is just sort of this this really taboo topic now that the new 2020 committee isn't going to touch, the USDA isn't going to touch, our organization, we're not bound by any of those same political constraints. And so why don't we update the research on sustainability and dietary guidance? So we did that. This is far too wonky to be in this presentation. I'll admit that right now, but I just wanted to share some results. What we found actually sort of challenged what the last committee found in 2015. That's partly because just more and more research is coming out on this, because people are just increasingly interested in this and increasingly aware, right, of what actually is happening with climate, and it's really hard to ignore now. So the healthy diet recommended by the dietary guidelines might actually lead to increased greenhouse gas emissions, energy use, and water use compared to what we're currently eating. And there's a number of reasons for that, but that's something we have to grapple with, right? It's important for us to shift towards healthy diets. right? We all know that we're living with just an unbearable burden of diet-related disease in this country. But how do we do that in ways that don't, drain our water supply, and contribute to greater greenhouse gas emissions? But like I said, what remains sort of consistent here is that among healthy dietary patterns, those that are higher in plant-based foods, lower in animal-based foods do tend to be more sustainable. The second piece of work that I'll touch on quickly here, and this is what Mary just graciously referenced in her introduction of me. I just put out a report this past week about the lack of funding that's available for sustainable nutrition science research. And we define sustainable nutrition science as sort of this intersection between, food production, climate, environment, and nutrition. And that's all, built on sort of a foundation of all the different social conditions that, permeate our food system. So, we were just looking at like, how much is this actually getting funding? We know that there's research funding in agriculture and sustainable agriculture. We know that there's some, but not a whole lot of funding for nutrition research, but like, who's looking at how those things connect? Are people talking to each other? And, how do we start to leverage those connections to really develop solutions to, both climate and public health crises? And this report is called From Silos to Systems, which you can pretty easily look up, I think, if you want to know more. But essentially, out of $73.2 billion that the federal government spends each year on average in federal research funding across the entire government, only about 16 million is awarded to projects in sustainable nutrition science, and it's less actually than 25 cents out of every $1,000 in federal research funding. So it's a very small drop in a very large bucket. And really importantly, few of the projects that we found center food justice or health equity in their goals, and very few are awarded to institutions like historically Black colleges and universities or tribal colleges and universities that are either serving or representing marginalized populations. So we like I think a lot of folks probably in this space are firmly supportive of the notion that the populations that are most impacted by health disparities, by environmental injustices, by food injustices, should be leading the way in terms of helping direct solutions, and that they should be listened to and given funding in this space. So that's another problem that we're making recommendations for. I'll stop there with more apologies for hitting you with these kind of wonky results, but again, happy to speak to any other aspects of my work in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Sara. And I cannot emphasize more how important policy is right now, and really working, whether it's at the local level or the federal level, because while individual choices definitely can make a difference, ultimately it's those systemic choices that are going to make the biggest difference of all. And so we're so glad to have you as one of the powerhouses out there who's advocating for that. So thank you so much for that. Our last speaker today is Marie Spiker. And let me give a brief introduction of Marie. And Marie, if you'd be willing to share your slides and get those up, I will give you an intro. So where is my introduction? There she is. Marie, PhD, is an assistant professor in the nutritional science program at the University of Washington School of Public Health. She teaches courses that prepare students to join an evolving food systems workforce and conducts research on public health nutrition, sustainable food systems, food loss and waste, systems modeling, and food systems governance. Marie, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary, for that introduction. And just to confirm, are you able to see my full-size title slide here?
Yes, you're good to go.
Perfect. Thank you. So hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here and to tell you about how I work in sustainability as a nutrition professional. And I am calling in from the land of the Coast Salish people, also known as Seattle. So I bring the perspective of a registered dietitian, an educator, and an academic researcher as an assistant professor at the University of Washington School of Public Health. And here at UW, within our nutritional sciences program, we have a new undergraduate major in food systems, nutrition, and health. And we also have a graduate coordinated program in dietetics. Prior to this role, I was a fellow at the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Foundation, and my goal with that work was to help grow the capacity of our profession in sustainable food systems. And in just a few moments, I'm going to briefly run through some resources I created while at the foundation that are all freely available. And prior to my foundation fellowship, I did my doctoral training in human nutrition and my dietetics training with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where I also worked with the Center for a Livable Future. And I did my undergraduate degrees in public health and medical anthropology at the University of Washington. And these days, I do research on many aspects of sustainable food systems, and Mary mentioned some of these. My research includes the sustainability of dietary patterns, so some overlap with what Sara was just talking about, food loss and waste, value chains for nutrition, and I use a whole range of research methods, including qualitative research and systems modeling. So I want to briefly share where you can access the resources that I created during my time as the Academy Foundation's Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems Fellow. If you go to eatrightfoundation.org and click on the resources tab, you can click on the Future of Food page, and that is where many of these resources will live. And I'm going to highlight just a few in particular. So what you'll see on the left here is there's an article in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics with a framework for action for how dietitians can leverage their expertise to support sustainable food systems. And the framework, I think it is broadly applicable, even if you are not a credentialed dietetics practitioner. I think it's very applicable to those working in nutrition and public health nutrition more broadly. And then a really nice accompaniment to this is on the right, there's a free 2-hour sustainable food systems primer for nutrition students and professionals and anyone who's interested in this space. And it includes the 7 modules that are shown here, and they're broken down into short 10 to 15 minute pieces. For a more formal and comprehensive introduction to food systems, the foundation has also released a sustainable food systems curriculum with 12 activities that can be incorporated into dietetics rotations. And then the foundation also created a directory of dietetics programs in the US that incorporate content related to sustainable food systems. Some of these programs use the foundation's curriculum, and some of them do it in other ways. And so if you go to the directory, you might recognize your program here, or if you're a part of a program that is not appearing on the directory and you know that your program has been incorporating sustainable food systems content, send the link to the directory to your program directors, and there's a place for them to opt in and get added to the directory. I also helped to develop and evaluate 2 webinar series on systems thinking within food systems. And these webinars, as well as materials to incorporate them into a larger classroom setting, are all freely available. And then one last resource that I want to highlight, and this one did not emerge from my foundation fellowship, but it was a broader initiative led by the Hunger and Environmental Nutrition Dietetics Practice Group. It's the Standards of Professional Performance for Dietitians in Sustainable Food Systems. And I worked on this with Sara Reinhart, so it's such a pleasure to see her again on this panel tonight, and also Meg Bruning, who's at Arizona State University. And this is a great resource if you're getting into this space and you want to think about your career trajectory and what your next steps might look like. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I had mentioned that I'm an assistant professor, and in this role, I split my time roughly equally between teaching and research. And so I want to talk briefly about the idea of research and what it means to do research at the intersection of food systems and nutrition. And so here I'm showing a table from a paper from Ella Ridgway in 2019 that situates our current moment within 4 major, what she's calling paradigms of public health nutrition. And so a paradigm here is a shared intellectual framework that guides our way of thinking and our ways of knowing and our priorities. And so Ridgway highlights here that our field started in 1700s with questions about the chemistry and the science of food and foodborne illness. And then we transition into a period of learning about micronutrients and prioritizing nutrient deficiencies. And we then moved on to a paradigm of thinking about dietary excess and imbalances. And now, since the 1970s, we're in this paradigm of looking at nutrition more holistically through the lens of food systems. And so the kinds of passion that we see in this group here at the Planetary Health Collective are perhaps new in the kind of momentum we're building and the ways that connections are being formed, but the seeds of this kind of conversation were planted several decades ago. And we could pinpoint some of the key people and works that really help to broaden the conversation of nutrition to encompass food systems, like Frances Moore Lape's Diet for a Small Planet in 1971, or Kate Clancy and Joan Gussow's proposal for Dietary Guidelines for Sustainability in 1986. And in addition to thinking about research paradigms, I also want to give you the language of research modes. And here I'm drawing from a great article, full citations at the bottom, by David Pelletier and a larger group of co-authors in 2013. And here they talk about the idea of mode 1 and mode 2 research. And in mode 1 research, the goal is to create knowledge that is fundamental and generalizable. So for example, we might ask a mode 1 question like, what's the biological mechanism by which deforestation leads to climate change? In mode 2 research, the goal is to create knowledge that is actionable. So for example, given what we know from our mode 1 research about the importance of reducing deforestation, we might ask, what are the political, economic, and social mechanisms by which we might actually create structures for inclusive governance and accountability that move us in the direction of less deforestation? And so I wanted to share both of these larger framings of research paradigms and research modes to give you this language and to also let you know that research on nutrient deficiency and dietary excess, this is all still important, and mode 1 research on fundamental mechanisms is and will always be important. But we're now living in a moment where we have embraced a larger research paradigm of food systems, and we have realized the importance of also bringing in mode 2 research, that mode in which we're using a whole range of interdisciplinary methods to learn how to create change at multiple scales. And I'll share one last framework with you. This is one that I was involved with along with Jess Fonzo, Alex Bellows, Andrew Thorne-Lyman, and Martin Bloom. This is a framework that you can find in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, where we lay out a research agenda for food systems. And we note that we need to value research that uses a variety of methods, as shown on the left here, research that has multiple points of intervention throughout the food system. So for example, we're not just trying to change people's individual behavior, but maybe we're also trying to change something about food supply chains or food production practices. And that's all shown in the middle. And then on the right, our interventions might have multiple goals that complement each other. So even if the ultimate goal is to improve human nutrition and health, doing that may entail some of these other complementary goals like lessening environmental impact, reducing structural inequities, and protecting human rights and dignity. So with that, I will pause, and I look forward to fielding any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much, Marie. You can tell you're a professor because that was just an excellent mini lecture. I feel like we all just got a little in education. So thank you so much for that. And wonderful resources. I highly recommend the papers that Marie recommended, and it's truly very helpful to know how much the Academy, if you are somebody who is getting your dietetics training right now, or is a registered dietitian, or is thinking about that the Academy has put sustainability on the map. Although I personally wish they would go even further with it than they are. But to know that they're doing as much work as they are, and that you've been a big part of that, Marie, is really helpful for all of us to know. So thank you for your work. I want to bring back our other panelists, Nadia and Sara, if you guys would get your videos back on so we can see you. I have a couple of questions that have been inspired by the thoughts that you gave us today. And of course, anybody else who has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to those in about 10 minutes. So as I mentioned earlier, many of us don't get training in sustainability or environmentalism or conservation in our training. And so as it relates to incorporating sustainability into your work or work in general as a nutrition professional, what was a step that you took along your educational or professional path that you felt helped to prepare you for your current role? So why don't we start with Nadia, since we haven't heard from you in a while.
All right. So, you know, I actually talk about this in my lessons about debunking this like green this idea of having a green thumb and not having a green thumb. And I kind of talk about when you're approaching something new, right? You would want to research and learn about it and align yourself with folks who seem to be the content experts on that. And oftentimes when we're wanting to grow a plant, we just stick it in, seed in the soil and put some water. And then if it doesn't grow, you're like, oh, I don't have a green thumb. And you just kind of dismiss it and, not approaching it with, okay, this is something new that I need to do research on and I need to learn. And so kind of taking that idea and plugging it into anything new that you would want to do, like becoming more involved in sustainable nutrition is aligning yourself with committees and organizations and signing up for newsletters and learning how you can make baby steps and big steps and becoming more involved. And so I always kind of speak to that and also talk about the baby steps, going to the farmer's market. If you can't grow, if you don't want to grow, go to the farmer's market to, sign up for the farmer share, and small changes that they do add up. And so that's sort of my approach.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I want to make sure everyone else has a chance to answer the question. But thank you. Absolutely. Small steps, self-education for sure is so meaningful. How about you, Sarah? What was the step that you felt was beneficial to your current role?
I'm gonna have to ask for Marie's forgiveness in saying this, but I I will say that, a lot of what I learned that helped shape my perspective and values around sustainability and food systems happened outside of my classrooms. So, just really being able to kind of look at what's happening in the place where you live. Is there a food policy council? Even something like a parent-teacher association at a school where there are parents talking about school food and potentially initiatives about food system sustainability. I mean, these things are happening in little pockets everywhere, and they're not necessarily always obvious until you start looking for them. So, even like Nadia said, just spending time at a farmer's market or finding a community garden, just, taking a chance and immersing yourself a little bit in some of these experiences, that was just immensely valuable to me. You can always follow up with that and take a wonderful class like I'm sure Marie teaches, and find books that really resonate with you. But there's nothing quite like putting yourself in that situation and having sort of an experiential learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all the students who are out there in our audience tonight, take note that it isn't just what happens in the classroom, although that's important too, but there's so much more beyond that. How about you, Marie, Professor?
Yeah, I think my response is actually going to be very complementary. I think one step that I've taken that's helped me in my career is anytime you've had an opportunity to learn in community with other people. And sometimes that community is one that you find and connect with these people because you are part of some kind of formal training, whether it's degree program or something else. But these communities can come in all shapes and forms, and some of them can come outside of the classroom. And finding people who can be finding people with shared professional interests, but that you also know them well enough as humans that are willing to have real talk, and you can have difficult conversations about things like, are we even doing the right thing here? Like, can we pause and take a couple steps back and think about the way we've been engaging with community, or thinking about the way we've been asking our research questions, right? And can we reassess, right? Do we want to be relating to each other, working in an entirely different way? And so finding a community of people where you can have those kind of tough conversations, and where you can process all the stuff that you might be learning inside or outside of a classroom. That I think is what has really influenced my career.
Excellent. And, I've really noted over the past couple of years that the events I've attended have very often been driven by non-nutrition professionals. They're talking about the food system, but they aren't necessarily nutritionists or dietitians, which has been very concerning to me. And I'm curious, in your experience, what kinds of relationships are you having with non-nutrition professionals? How have you worked across the sectors and collaborated with people in a way that has both elevated the role of the nutrition professional, but has also maybe helped you in your endeavors? And Sara, I know you work with a lot of non-nutrition professionals, so perhaps we can start with you.
Thank you. Yes, I work almost exclusively with non-nutrition professionals, so it's fun to be in these spaces. Yeah, I think I am the only nutrition, trained nutrition person at our organization of 250 people. So I'm working a lot with, agroecologists, so sustainable agriculture experts, but I'm also working with policy experts. I'm working with comms folks, so communications experts, outreach experts, and it's really wonderful because it helps you, in addition to you gaining new skill sets and new information. I mean, you just realize what an asset nutritionists are in a lot of these spaces. So it's kind of a two-way street there in terms of, just recognizing that like Mary said, in a lot of conversations and a lot of places where decisions are being made, quite frankly, about nutrition and food systems. There's not always a nutritionist in the room. And so being able to recognize that, hey, that's a real value add that we have as professionals in this space, I think is really important.
Thank you so much. How about you, Nadia?
I agree with aligning yourself with, folks who are immersed in that world. I have privately, but also as the co-chair of a nutrition organization with dietitians who are interested in agricultural systems. I've been to the virtual and in-person tours of rice farms, of animal farms, of various farming systems. I actually this morning attended an agricultural virtual farm tour, learning about not only the system of the farming system, but the racial inequities as well. This was hosted by a Black farmer who talked about the challenges the farming community of underserved population, minority population faces, because it's all very intertwined, and the more you learn, the more it kind of connects the dots, and the more questions you can ask of how can we. This was one of the questions during today's webinar was, as dietitians, how can we better help farmers? How can we better help farmers of color? How can we bridge this inequity gap? So really just researching and again, aligning yourself with the folks who are really doing that work, who can really speak to that.
Excellent. Yeah, that was another question I was going to ask if we had time, which is about those kinds of allyships and how dietitians, nutrition professionals can be supportive of Indigenous communities, of BIPOC farmers, of farm workers, addressing those racial inequities and really making sure that we're a part of that conversation. So glad you listened to that. I would love to have you share that webinar too, if you have access to it. Many of us would probably like to watch the recording of it.
Yeah.
Let me hop over to Marie for a final word here on collaborations with non-nutrition professionals and how that may have been of value to you or to them.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I can share briefly about one of my favorite collaborative experiences was as part of the research I did as a doctoral student. I worked with a research center that used computational modeling tools and applied them to a variety of public health issues. So those might be related to flu or antibiotic resistance or foodborne illness. And what we were applying some computational modeling tools was the issue of post-harvest loss and waste of vegetables and other perishable foods in low resource settings. And what I loved about this project is I had kind of two main kind of groups that I interacted with. One was people who had expertise about supply chains, and this was in the setting of India. So people who understood how farms go from how foods go from farm through the supply chain, through retail markets, and are made available to consumers, and all the ways that losses and waste can occur throughout that supply chain. So I was talking to people who had this supply chain expertise. And then the other group of people I worked really closely with was our programmers, software engineers, people who were working on kind of the tech side of all of the computational modeling. And in this whole project, I think, Sarah, similar to your experience, I was the only person who was bringing a nutrition perspective. And what was really exciting to me is that with me bringing a nutrition perspective, we were able to look at a problem like food loss and waste among low resource supply chains and really find like a win-win or a triple win kind of situation where if you can reduce food loss and waste, not only are you lessening environmental impact, but you're also supporting livelihoods along food supply chains. And then you also have the potential to support food and nutrition security. And so having my perspective, so in addition to me learning a ton and just really enjoying learning from these other groups of people, we were able to really add to the importance of, okay, here's why it's so important that we find ways to reduce loss and waste.
Excellent. Wonderful. My final question for a quick wrap up from each of you is, as you all know, or maybe you don't know, but as you might know, the UN Food System Summit is happening this week. And so is the Counter Summit from the Global People Summit, trying to reduce some of the emphasis on maybe the corporate infrastructure that may be driving the conversations at the United Nations Food System Summit. I am curious, from your perspective, what are you hoping to see come out of this week's events regarding the transformation, hopefully, of our food and agricultural system? I know that's a huge question, so if you can just answer in, 2 sentences, I'm kidding, just to take a moment to give us your thoughts. Let's start again. Actually, let's start with you, Marie, since we just heard from you, and let's hear from you again here.
Sure. So one thing that I will be watching for is who's at the table, and who is it that I'm always thinking about our shared governance and what can inclusive, transparent governance look like, and thinking about questions of accountability in the food system. So that's what I'll have my eyes open for, is just who's at the table. And for all of everything that's being discussed it's important. We know that food systems have the potential to be a vehicle for change across all 17 sustainable development goals, which are interrelated. And so all of the issues that we're talking about, it's food, but it's also climate change and gender empowerment and education and poverty. So these are important issues. And I always like to keep an eye out for who's at the table, who has a say, and who's missing. So that's what I'll be looking for.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that. How about you, Nadia? What are your thoughts about the Food System Summit?
I have to agree with Marie about who's at the table and who is benefiting the most. Like today's webinar, the farmer talked about, in general, farmers are taking the most risk, but they're not getting the biggest reward. And so I would love to see some conversations around that and about shifting the who's at the table and who's getting the bigger payoffs.
Absolutely. Thank you. And how about you, Sarah? One final word here, and then we'll take a couple audience questions.
Transparency is going to be my word as well. Just being very open about what folks stand to gain and what folks stand to lose in this process, and really being clear about what the goals are and trying to really provide a some compelling evidence that this isn't just a lot of greenwashing.
Excellent. Thank you all. I will let Brenda take over for right now and field some audience questions. We've had a lot of chat, so hopefully we won't go too many minutes over, but I will let you take it over, Brenda. Thank you so much.
All right, let me get all set up here. I'm like moderating and getting all the things organized, but pretty much I think we have one big overarching question that would be super valuable for each of you to answer, and it has to do with education. So, and this is a question that not only are we getting in the group, but we also get a lot outside of that. Do you feel like it's important for dietitians to find additional education in food systems or pursue a master's in food systems? Or if they're interested in policy, do they need to take a policy track? Or Nadia, even to get into what you do, what kind of education do you think is beneficial? Do you think additional kind of formal education would be helpful, or a lot of self-study? So I'm just gonna go clockwise on my screen. So I'll start with Marie. What do you think? What do you think the answer to that is?
So I do think it's always beneficial to seek out multiple kinds of training, like multiple disciplines, so that you can learn a different set of professional language and also tap into a different group of people and different way of thinking. But I say that with a caveat that it doesn't always have to be like a formal degree program. And if you're at the beginning of your career, it might make a lot of sense to pursue, multiple different kinds of formal degree programs, or, dual majors, and combine them in an innovative way. You might be further along in your career to the point where that doesn't make the most sense, but there may be a lot of opportunities for you to tap into those perspectives. And so I always encourage that kind of mixing and getting a different kind of disciplinary perspective, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a degree program.
That's great advice. All right, we'll switch over to Nadia. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm a little torn because I would love to see some, aspects of formal training, but as we know that the workload to become and study to become a dietitian, it's already pretty packed. I wouldn't want to say let's add on even more. But at the same time, it would be really nice to see dietitians leading, having some sort of shared responsibility in climate change, and have it not be, more of an interest of, something that's really cute that you do. And, it's just like, it's really an honor and accept that it is such an integral part of not just nutrition, but our way of life and what the planet will look like in a couple of years, and being able to speak to that in counseling sessions, and the handouts that you give in every sort of aspect of nutrition, because the two are so closely and intertwined. So I really, I'm torn with that one.
Yeah, it's complex. It's hard.
Yeah.
I think that's why we get so many questions about it, right? I mean, it's hard to make those decisions too. So awesome. Well, thank you. And Sara, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would offer two pieces of advice here. So the first would be, if you're trying to get to this point that is fairly well defined, and you're not sure if you need a degree to get there or not, try to find some job descriptions of positions that you think you would like, or that you'd be, like, I'd be happy to land here, and see what they require. If they require an MPH, if they require an RD, a bachelor's, just kind of get a feel for, some of the things that you might like to do, and the steps that are, going to be necessary to get there. And then if you're in a place where you're actually considering, a program at, school X, Y, or Z, try to find somebody who has done that program, and just, chat with them for 15 minutes or so. Most people will be really happy to do that. You can always email their admissions department and see if they'll connect you with somebody. There's nothing like getting kind of that personal, one-on-one conversation with somebody who will give you a lot more context than like a school or a program's website will. So I would say those are probably two pieces of advice I would give.
Awesome. Great. Well, to be respectful of everyone's time, I know we had a lot of questions. We will kind of track the questions, and if we can get you guys answers, we'll send them in our Facebook group and on Instagram. But I just want to thank all of our speakers again for coming and donating your time to be here with us. I think this was a really valuable experience for everyone, and we're just so thankful that you guys were willing to do this. Awesome. All right. Well, to finish out today's webinar, we are just asking that if you do have a second, if you'll fill out this survey that I put in the chat, that just gives us a better feel for what you guys are really interested in when it comes to how the PHC can help provide education for you. And then please feel free to join our Facebook group. There's always a ton of resources. If you are kind of new to sustainability, or if you're a veteran in the sustainability and nutrition space, there's always really good information there, and tons of like webinars, reports, all sorts of education. So feel free to join. I just dropped that in the chat. And then you can always follow us on Instagram at the Planetary Health Collective and connect with us on LinkedIn. Again, we're the Planetary Health Collective, so you can find us there. And our blog, we are putting up new articles every week right now. And if you're interested in getting involved with the PHC, writing for us, helping us develop some resources, please reach out to us at hello@theplanetaryhealthcollective.org. Sorry, it's just planetaryhealthcollective.org. But yes, we would love to hear from you guys. So thank you all again. And one last thank you to our speakers for joining us tonight. Have a good night, everybody.